Alrighty, we are back with chapter 13 of Outlier by Lisa Beeson. Santa, don't start. Lord Almighty. Okay, chapter 13. When everything was packed and ready to go, Cale drove them to the private airfield where his jet was waiting for them. Reed and Tober were already there getting everything prepared. They boarded quickly. During the 9-hour flight to Miami, Cale Oh, God. I swear my head is making it so hard to read. Reed and Tober were already there getting everything prepared. They boarded quickly. During the 9-hour flight to Miami, Cale deigned to explain the backstory of the stone they were going to find, after Cam and Ari nagged him about it for the first hour or so. Have either of you heard of Muska? Ari nodded her head yes. At the same time, Cam said, Nope. They were a confederation of tribes that lived in the area that is known as modern-day Bogota. They had a religious tradition wherein the ruler, known as the Zippa, or Golden Man, used to cover his body in gold dust and float out on a royal barge to the middle of the lake, Guatavita, with offerings of gold and jewels. He would throw the treasure into the water for the Guatavita goddess. This tradition was thought to be the origin of the legend of El Dorado, which is Spanish for the Golden One. About 20 years ago, my researchers found the remnants of an old journal written by a Dominican friar who was living in the Spanish colony of Santa Marta when he joined the Gonzalo Jimenez de Quesada on his expedition to find the elusive El Dorado. By 1537, they entered the lands of the Muska people and claimed it in the name of Charles V. The friar didn't share the conquistadors' apathetic attitude towards the native people. So while they pillaged the cities and sacred sites for gold and treasures, he endeavored to learn the Muska language in order to teach the Muscan the ways of his Christian God. 2 years later, the Spanish conquistadors discovered the religious city of Sogamoso, where the sacred temple of the sun was located. But before the Spanish made their way towards the temple, a Muscan priest secretly sought out the friar. The Muscan priest told the friar that the head priest, Sugamuxi, had seen his coming in a dream and wished to speak with him privately. The friar inferred that the high priest's dream was a vision that he would spread the word of God in his land, so he followed the Muscan priest through the city to the back entrance of the temple. The priest took him to a room where Sugamuxi awaited him, holding a small golden box that held 3 gems of different colors. Each gem had strange writing on it. Sugamuxi told the friar that the priests of the temple had been entrusted with the gems so long ago that they had forgotten their true origin, but he gave them a name that the friar translated to mean keys to the stars. Sugamuxi told the friar about a dream in which the invaders stole their precious relics and burned their temple. In the dream, he entrusted the gems to a man with strange golden hair, who spoke the language of his people and shone with the light of the sun. Cam gasped. The friar was a progeny? I would assume so, Cale said, a bit peeved at the interruption. And apparently so was Sugamuxi, since he seems to have had the ability to see radiant energy, Ari interjected. Could the Muscan Golden Man tradition stem from how they used to worship a golden-skinned Ayan colonist? Yes, well, back to what I was saying, Cale drawled. Sugamuxi asked the friar to take the gems and to keep them safe from the invaders. The friar agreed to take them, and the next day the temple was ransacked and burned to the ground. The friar hid the gems from the conquistadors and eventually made his way back to Santa Marta, where he unfortunately fell ill and died. After that, the stones seemed to have vanished. We couldn't find any trace of them until they appeared on the manifest for a flotilla of galleons leaving for Spain from Havana in 1638. The stones were split up between the Santa Maria de Gracia, the San Cristobal, and the Magdalena. After many unfortunate delays, the ill-fated flotilla set off 5 weeks behind schedule and was separated from the rest of the fleet by a hurricane. The San Cristobal was flown off course and sank off the coast of Dry Tortugas. By the time they came back to salvage the wreck, there was no sign of the galleon. I've managed to find the other 2 stones, but this one has eluded me, until recently. Human technology has finally improved so that I was able to locate the wreckage trail of the San Cristobal on the ocean floor only a month ago. I promised the private salvaging company I hired that they could have 50% of the profits of whatever they find, which has made them enthusiastic enough to speed up progress. Normally it would take years to search through the wreckage to find the stone, but now that I have you, it should cut time down exponentially, he said, looking at Ari like she was his new favorite toy. Glad to help out and all, but I kind of just lucked into the stones I already found, Ari said worriedly. I never actually went searching for one before, especially not on an ocean floor. I can't promise anything. She didn't think this was going to be as easy as Kale expected. They've already started excavating, so when we get there, you can make a quick scan of what they've already found. If it's not there, then we'll dive down and search underwater. The site is already mapped out and gridded. We're not going down there blind, Kale assured her. I hope you're right. Ari had been nervous about coming back to the States, but they were able to land near Miami on a private airstrip and drive to Key West without any problems. It pays to travel with Kale. While their boat was still being prepared, they all stayed at a rental house with a private pool, where Kale taught Ari... I can't talk. Where Kale taught Ari how to scuba dive. She took to it easily, having already researched all the equipment, procedures, and hand signals online, and they both felt confident she would do fine in open water. The next day, Kale got the call saying the ship was ready, so after lunch they drove 2 cars down to the marina. Reed drove the car with Kale, Cam, and Ari, while Tober drove the car with their luggage and some mysterious black footlockers that she hadn't noticed originally. When they got to the marina, Cam and Ari looked out the car windows as they drove past rows of luxury yachts. Which one are we going on? Cam asked eagerly while eyeing the one with the bunch of half-naked women in bikinis partying on deck. That one, Kale said, pointing to the one at the end of the dock. That was, of course, the largest yacht there. Honestly, Kale, I have to know, how did you get this wealthy? Arya looked him in the eyes, letting him know that she expected him to actually answer this time, and not just brush off the question like he had before. He let out a long-suffering sigh. I've seized lucrative opportunities using my skill set, made smart business investments, and put the money in high-yield accounts accruing interest over 60-odd years. Before she could ask anything more, Reed parked and said in a booming voice from the front, "We're here!" They all exited the car, and Ari went over to Reed, who was heading towards the vehicle with all the luggage. In a hushed tone, she asked, what did he mean when he said lucrative opportunities using his skill set? He was a mercenary, lass, he said with a devilish grin and a wink. It's how the 3 of us met. Well, don't worry. We've been out of the game for years now. In fact, we hadn't seen much of each other recently before you 2 showed up. Then he proceeded to take the suitcases out of the trunk, as if what he just said was absolutely normal and warranted no further explanation. I've been living with a bunch of killers for hire. Can you really get this rich by being a mercenary? You can when you're as skilled and smart as Kale. He's always 7 steps ahead of everyone else. After a while, Tober and I just learned to trust him. Even if what he was doing didn't make any sense, it all came together eventually. Before she could ask any more questions, Ari saw a man and a woman in their mid to late 20s walking down the docks towards them. Cale walked over and shook both their hands. The man was of Asian descent, but judging from his Texas A&M t-shirt and worn-in Dallas Cowboys ball cap, he was definitely all-American. The woman was a fit-looking brunette with sun-kissed blonde highlights. She was pretty in a way that gave her a natural confidence, but it seemed to Ari that Cale's presence seemed to fluster her, and Ari could tell that she was obviously infatuated with him. She was acting all giggly and nervous, which must have been out of character for her because the Texas A&M guy gave her a look that said, "What is wrong with you?" And every time Cale came in contact with her, or even close to touching her, her radiant energy would swell and spark. Ari had noticed this occurrence before with other people while she was growing up. It seemed to her that humans were only physically aware of radiant energy when they were scared or really attracted to someone. Cale motioned Cam and Ari over to meet their new traveling companions. Ari came reluctantly and hid behind her poker face. It was the first time she had interacted with anyone besides the Artemir gang in months, and she was hit with an annoying pang of social anxiety. Dang it, I thought I was over this. She didn't feel quite as skinny and gangly as she had before, since she now had a solid layer of lean muscle from training. But she still felt shy and awkward. It didn't help that she was the same height as the man and about 4 inches taller than the woman. She had gotten used to towering over Gemma, but it was still weird for her to be taller than most adult women. Her abnormal height made Ari feel like she had a big flashing sign over her head that read, "Big ol' alien, right here," with an arrow pointing down at her. She was perfectly ready to stop growing at any time. Meanwhile, Cam practically skipped over to them. He was a very social creature, and he'd been deprived of that for the past couple months. He reminded Ari of Dennis, just excited and happy to be there. Cale put his hand on Ari's back, bringing her forward. "These are my wards, Cam and Ari," he said, introducing them. Cam smiled and gave them a mock salute, and Ari just nodded. "Children, this is Serena Grayson and Mike Quang. They are both nautical archaeology grad students at Texas A&M, and they've been kind enough to assist us in our endeavor." Ari first shook Serena's hand, and then Mike's. She hadn't meant to read his intentions. It just sort of happened. She understood what Cale was talking about now when he said humans broadcast everything. Mike thought that she was attractive, but he immediately felt uncomfortable about that, because Cale had just referred to her as a child. Ari smiled politely, but quickly took her hand away. Then she noticed Cam was still holding on to Serena's hand and looking at her appreciatively. "Nice to meet you, but just to be clear, I'm not a child. I'm a full-grown man," he said with that impish grin of his that let him get away with anything. If anyone else had said that, they would have come off as weird or creepy. But somehow he was able to pull it off, and Serena just shook her head and laughed at his bravado. Ari could tell just by looking at the energy sparks around his hand that Cam was crushing on her hard. Well, this should be an interesting trip. 16 is not a full-grown man, lad, Reed scoffed as he and Tober walked by with some of the luggage. "Basically 17, Cam corrected as Cale, Serena, and Mike started conversing and walking towards the boat. As Cam and Ari trailed behind, Ari nudged him with her elbow. "She's like way older than you, Cam." His chest puffed up with confidence. "Not a problem. I like my woman like I like my wine." "You don't drink wine." "Shut it, Pipes, you're ruining my metaphor." She laughed. "But seriously, I wouldn't even bother. She's all about Cale." He grimaced. "What does that geezer have that I don't have?" Let's see. Lots and lots of money?" "I got money," he pouted. "Not ginormous yacht money," Ari said, as they stood there looking at the most luxurious boat she had ever seen. Its motors were starting to roar to life. It was sleek and silver, at least 3 levels high, and had the name Talisman painted on the side. She's a beauty, yes? No, that's terrible. My phone's recording, so I can't look up an accent to see how it should sound. Amont bella bella. No, oh gosh, I can't get the accent in my head. She's a beauty, yes? He said a heavily accented voice right behind them, making them both jerk around in surprise. Okay, I'm just gonna butcher his voice. Apologies. Ari could tell right away that the man didn't mean them any harm, which was lucky for him since she had been really close to severely hurting him. He was in a crisp white ship's crew uniform and was only about an inch or so taller than her. He had kind, soft brown eyes and reminded her of an Italian Ichabod Crane. He held up his hands apologetically. "Mi scusi, I did not mean to startle you. My name is Paolo Borelli. I am the chief engineer on the Talisman." He held out his hand for them to shake, so Cam and Ari both shook it, and Paolo continued talking. "She's an oceanic 120-foot super yacht that fuses luxury with the adventurous spirit of an expedition vessel," he said, like he memorized it off a script. "She has twin MTU 16-valve M94 diesel engines that can propel the ship to a maximum speed of 27 knots and a cruising speed of 23 knots. But that's not the best part yet," he said fondly, like he was bragging about his firstborn child. "When she's cruising at 8 knots, her twin auxilia 120-kilowatt electric engines turn on, and the low fuel consumption figures have to be seen to be believed. Magnifica!" he said, kissing the tips of his fingers and gesturing towards the ship. "The boat has 4 engines?" Cam asked. "See? Would you like to see them?" Cam nodded excitedly. "Not so fast, Paolo," said an efficient-looking 20-something Italian woman in a similar uniform, whose accent wasn't quite so pronounced. "Mr. Cale wants me to show them where their cabins are first." I'm going back into Irish. "Naturalmente," he said, ushering them onto the back of the boat. "Another time, then." The woman introduced herself as Cosima, and that she was the ship's stewardess. Cam, finding a new outlet for his desire, saddled up next to her and asked how many other crew members there were. "The Talisman has a crew of 5. Captain Costa, Marco Nietzsche, the first mate, Paolo, whom you've met, is the engineer, and Giacomo D'Angelo, the ship's chef. Normally a ship this size would require more, but Mr. Cale prefers a smaller crew." "You're all Italian?" Cam asked curiously. "Yes, the ship was built and staffed in Italy. Mr. Cale instructed that we should meet him here in Key West." She said like it that was no big deal. "And we arrived here yesterday." Cosima led them through the main deck lounge area and a dining area, all decorated in top-of-the-line materials that were pristine white with accents of gray and tan, to a slim staircase that took them down to the living quarters. They each had their own cabin with a queen-size bed, a 42-inch TV built into the wall, and their own bathroom. All Ari's stuff was already waiting for her on the bed. Everything was so posh that she had to look out the window to remind herself that she was still on a boat. As she looked out the porthole, she saw that they were starting to pull away from the dock and out of the marina. Cosima showed them the bathrooms, which were stocked with everything they could possibly need, and how to work the TVs. When Cosima was satisfied that the two of them had the hang of everything, she turned to Ari. "Mr. Cale instructed that as soon as you are done settling in, he would like you to accompany him. Mr. Quang and Miss Grayson up in the master's quarters." "Just me?" Ari asked uncertainly, not sure why Cam was being left out. "Yes, miss," Cosima said with an efficient nod, like it was not her job to question the owner's wishes. She just did what she was told. "It's fine, Pipes. I'll just go see what Paolo is up to," Cam said, shrugging his shoulders like it didn't matter much to him. "Or maybe hang with Cosima a bit," he said hopefully, giving the stewardess a flirty wink. "Mr. Cale instructed that you meet with Mr. Reed and Mr. Tober in the wheelhouse," she said, ignoring his attempts at flirtation with the grace of someone accustomed to deflecting the affections of entitled playboys. "Come, I'll show you where it is." Cam followed Cosima back to the stairs, and Ari decided to follow as well. She could put her stuff away later. Cosima showed Cam where the wheelhouse was, and then showed Ari the stairs that led up to the master's quarters on the second level. Ari made her way up and saw Kale, Mike, and Serena sitting at a round table shaded by the sun deck above them. They were gathered around a laptop, and she could hear Mike describing what they were looking at. Using 3D photogrammetry, we were able to map out the ship's debris trail in exact detail. Ari walked over to stand behind Kale's seat and looked over his shoulder at the three-dimensional image of the coral and silk-covered contents of the San Cristobal spread out across the ocean floor, that according to the measurements on the screen were 55 feet below the ocean's surface. We believe this is the extent of it, but it's hard to tell after hundreds of years of currents and hurricanes. Oh, sorry. I'm looking for something. Okay, I don't know if Serena has an accent, but we believe this is the extent of it, but it's hard to tell after hundreds of years of currents and hurricanes, Serena said, trailing off. It was obvious she was trying to be realistic, but not wanting to upset the man paying the bills. The first part of the trail is mostly ballast and cannonballs, Mike continued, pointing to the image on the screen. So far, we've mostly found swords and munitions towards the front. The organic cargo have deteriorated long ago. We did find some gold plates and silver coins towards the back, where the ship's cabins were located. That's most likely where the gem will be, if they haven't found it already. They were planning to go down again this morning after we left. Wes and his crew are very eager to get everything up as quickly as they can. Ari could hear the slight disapproval in his voice, even though he was trying hard to hide it. He was studying to be a nautical archaeologist after all, and the salvage company Cale hired were probably just a bunch of treasure hunters, excited to find actual treasure. They most likely were not taking the care and precautions Mike and Serena were trained to take to preserve the integrity of the find. That's when Ari realized why Cale had hired graduate students instead of actual archaeologists. They had the intelligence and know-how, but they were probably up to their eyeballs in debt and less skilled in ethical dilemmas, making them more likely to turn a blind eye to their benefactor taking off with a piece of history. Cale looked thoughtfully at the computer screen, rubbing his chin. If they haven't found it already, then I would like to go down with you tomorrow. He stood up and put an arm around Ari's shoulders. And Ari will be going down with us. She's been very interested in the field of archaeology lately. This would be a great opportunity for her, he said, looking at her like a doting father figure. She knew he was just doing it for show, but it kind of weirded her out a bit. Cale wasn't the fatherly type, even though a very small part of her, which she'd deny if anyone asked, kind of wanted him to be. Mike and Serena both nodded and said that it would be fine since it wasn't like they could really tell him no. I'll be very careful, I promise, Ari said, trying to reassure them. Then she felt the ship start to speed up as it hit open water. She heard Cam's voice coming from the front of the boat, screaming with pure joy. A grin spread across her face because she knew exactly what he was doing. She ran down to the main deck where she saw Cam standing at the very front with his arms outstretched like that scene from Titanic, yelling into the wind, "I'm king of the world!" Ari just rolled her eyes and shook her head at him. What a weirdo. Then she went to join him. And that was the end of chapter 13. Whoop, whoop. I'm going to go ahead and film chapter 14 too, even though I'm struggling here, but I would like to have more to listen to at work. So I'm going to get these done. Get them done. Get her done. Why don't we just get her done, don't we? Yeah. Okay, sorry. Alrighty. Thank you for joining for Chapter 13 of Outlier by Lisa Beeson. Peace.